estate promoter, Walter C. Moore, and his associates in the Texas Rice Development Company on what had been the bull pasture of the Abel H. Shanghai Pierce Ranch. Next, please. Palacios was intensively promoted in the newspapers, not only in the Palacios Beacon, but in others along the Texas Gulf Coast, in order to get people to ride the Southern Pacific Railway to Palacios. In 1906, it took 6 hours. You get her like practically in no time from Houston via the railway. Next, please. And here you see my kind of piecing together pages from the Sanborn insurance maps. This is a particular type of map that historic preservationists love because it shows, as you can see, the outline of buildings on blocks that enables you to understand at any one point in time what the townscape looked like. Next, please. Palacios was, of course, part of its historic context was its development as one of a number of seaside and bayside resort communities, mostly from the early 20th century, starting from Port Arthur near the Louisiana border, which, as hard as it may seem to imagine today, was developed to be the Palm Beach of Texas in order to bring people directly Kansas City, 1,000 miles south on the Kansas City Southern Railway. And as you go down the coast, you find Freeport, Port Lavaca, Port Aransas, Point Isabel, almost all the way to the mouth of the Rio Grande. These communities that, at least initially, were developed to be seaside and bayside resorts. And of course, the Palacios Pier at its most grandiose. Next, please. This wonderful photograph, which I took off the kind of video monitor of images at the Palacios Museum showing the city in the early 1900s, I think before the vegetation grew. Next, please. And of course, the sequence of very significant buildings that remain in Palacios. Next, please. Palacios is particularly noted for its bayfront bungalows, this particular house type of the early 20th century, of which your community has some very spectacular examples. Next, please. Next, please. Including the work of several builders and architects from the period of Palacios' initial development, in this case, C.F. Emmons. This was his own house. Next, please. As you can see from the Houston Post-Dispatch. Next, please. And then, of course, a series of wonderful downtown remaining buildings, most of which were built between 1910 and 1912. And I was having a conversation with Roman last night about how many buildings are still standing in downtown Palacios, which I think represents how many buildings of significance were built here during that short time period, with, of course, as you see, this wonderful, marvelous brick titanium. Next, please. The builder called Bontrager, who built this, the R.J. Hill building. And notable, as was Charlie Emmons. Next, please. And the building with the red canopy was built by Emmons. Both Bontrager and Emmons built these buildings of concrete block, which was sort of a new technology. So that is another kind of historic factor in the significance of the community. Next, please. And of course, buildings that got moved here, such as St. John's Episcopal Church. Next, please. What I have discovered in becoming acquainted with Palacios is that in addition to the initial stratum of historic architecture, there are other chronological layers, and I particularly am aware of the mid-20th century modern architecture of Palacios. Of course, I think you recognize the Troll House. Next, please. And the Harrison House. The Harrison House was designed by Grace Pierce's cousin, sort of architecture sort of runs in her family. Abel B. Pierce of Houston. It's one of two houses that I know that he designed in Palacios. And with the Troll House is the sort of outstanding mid-20th century modern house of Palacios. Next, please. And of course, the grocery store downtown from 1959. Again, all of these buildings seem to have been built in a very short, compact time period. And I discovered, using the sort of resources such as the online editions of the Palacios Beacon, the Matagorda County deed records, including things like mechanics liens, that in addition to Abel B. Pierce, the architect who was based in Houston, he also had a cousin, Abel H. Pierce, who was a designer builder in Palacios and designed the building that's now the bookstore on Main Street. So it's, I think, one of the kind of discoveries that you make is that your community is rich in resources from a number of eras. Next, please. And then I was kind of sad to see that this building was not there anymore. I took this photograph in 2023, and I think it disappeared shortly afterward. A building that I always was attracted to because I couldn't quite figure out what it must have been. It turned out, of course, as I'm sure you know, it was a doctor's office. There were two doctors, and each one got the little kind of conical portion of the building as his office. Next, please. And then, of course, the First Baptist Church by Calhoun, Tungate, and Jackson, architects of Houston. They were prolific Baptist architects. They designed many buildings on the campus of Baylor University, and again, a very handsome late mid-century building. It's actually from the mid-1970s, so it's the very end of that period. Next, please. And when assessing the historic significance of the community, historians will look not only at the town itself, but at kind of wider frames of reference. Here, of course, a regional frame looking across Tres Palacios Bay. Next, please. To College Port. The Towered House was designed by the Houston architect Bertzel P. Briscoe. Grace referred to the book that I wrote about his work. I got to visit this house in 2009, and at that time, although the exterior had been altered, the interior was totally intact. I think it has one of the great arts and crafts interiors in Texas that I know of, and I was really stunned to see the interior. Next, please. And so looking from that tower across Tres Palacios Bay toward Palacios, it gives you a sense of the kind of regional scope of Palacios development. Next, please. And I would kind of extend further from Matagorda County to Wharton County, and one of the great, miraculous success stories, really on par with the preservation of the Luther Hotel, was the bringing back to life of the badly altered, badly added to, and about to be demolished Wharton County Courthouse. Through the activism of a painting contractor, David Buchek, and his son, Houston architect David Buchek Jr. David Buchek Jr., my friend, the architect, has transformed himself into one of the major preservation architects in Texas. And although he and his father did not design the restoration and partial reconstruction of the Wharton County Courthouse, they were the kind of powers behind persuading the county judge and county commissioners of Wharton County to pursue what seemed to them impossible to visualize, which was to bring this building back to its 1886 condition from its very kind of demoralizing condition in the early 1980s. Next, please. And of course, in downtown Portland, you probably recognize the buildings of Monterey Square. Most of that block was the work of the Victoria architect Jules Lepland. Next, please. You know, of course, Lepland's Blessing Hotel in your neighboring community of Blessing. Next, please. The bank in Blessing. And you can sort of recognize Lepland's touch. He was a prolific architect. At one point, the Victoria Advocate, again, a newspaper online that you can have easy access to, the Victoria Advocate, I think, wrote in about 1910 that Lepland had 40 construction projects underway simultaneously. He was a very busy guy and clearly riding the rails that connected Victoria to regional communities. And he loved this typology, this kind of particular building type for banks with the inset diagonally aligned front door and the kind of opening onto the column that was actually supporting the corner of the building. Next, please. And then, of course, one of his masterworks, Nazareth Academy in Victoria, next to St. Mary's Church. So I'm kind of trying to advance, again, the regional context and architectural historical context of what you have here in Palacios to understand how it relates to the wider regional and economy and also the cultural economy of the Texas Gulf Coast in the early 20th century. So at this point, I'm going to hand off the microphone